questions that he wasn't asked 40 years ago. And those questions had to do with, did you know Mr. Salazar? Could you have picked him out of a crowd? Were you familiar with him? And the answers to all those questions was no. The problem, of course, again, is we're now talking 40 plus years later. And that's, again, the problem with trying to go back and reconstruct.
Was he credible?
I talked to him over the phone, and that's what he told me. I really couldn't speak to his credibility, obviously.
Mike, what about this?
What questions would you have asked if you were doing this happened now?
I would have asked the questions I just talked about with Mr. Wilson. But if we had been on the planet back then, I was in high school, but if we had been back on the planet then and being a vibrant oversight agency, what we would have had to do and what we would have done was asked about all of the tactical decision making, the weapon choice questions, the kinds of questions that we highlight in our report. Our report talks about all of what we think are tactical blunders, at least look through 2011 modern day policing tactics, and those tactical blunders should have been addressed by an investigation. In those days, there wasn't an internal affairs investigation looking into tactical issues. There is now. And so if this event, unfortunate event, or something similar to that had happened tomorrow, and let's hope it doesn't, at least there would be that layer of review, and people would be held accountable, at least in an administrative way, when in this case there wasn't even any look into potential accountability.
Is there a transcript of your conversation with Mr. Wilson?
Were there policies in effect back then that would have affected the way deputies reacted in that kind of a situation? Did they follow any of these policies, or was it completely out of policy?
Well, the policies then are significantly different than they are now. The training then is significantly different than it is now. So again, it's difficult to know, looking at today's policies and matching up behavior 40 years ago, it's difficult to make that assessment. But certainly there were policies with regard to performance issues. I'm saying is that in critical incidents like this, that happened 40 years ago, there wasn't that kind of administrative review. That just simply didn't exist in the Sheriff's Department and didn't exist anywhere in law enforcement. Those are different times, and the kind of accountability that occurs today, at least with progressive law enforcement, didn't occur then.
Is there a transcript of your conversation with Mr. Wilson?
No, there isn't. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I didn't tape record the conversation. Obviously, you need to be a law enforcement officer to do that, and I didn't, but I did receive that information.
I understand that you asked Wilson if he were willing to speak with the family members,
Yes.
and he refused.
Yes.
On what ground? Can you tell us on what grounds he refused?
The individual, Mr. Wilson, was asked, and he said that he has lingering bad memories about the way in which he was treated, and his family was receptive to death threats shortly after the incident. And so those memories were the reasons why he decided not to talk to.
Is there any reason why Sheriff Baca shouldn't have just released these records instead of having you go through this exercise?
I'm not here to speak for Sheriff Baca, but I can tell you that it was a helpful exercise for us.
Because we're in a situation where you have a request for public records. He says no,
Yes.
but here's another idea. We'll let your office review it all and spend all your time and money on this report. And wouldn't it have been simpler if he just released the records?
I really, that's a question that probably is best addressed to Mr. Baca.
He's not here.
He's not here.
Mr. Janelle, so you said that you're an advocate of transparency. So the sheriff says he's going to allow access, but the access is very limited. And we won't get to hear the audio tape. We can hear him, but write it down. That doesn't work for radio. But we can't see anything. We can't take any pictures. What do you think about that? What is your opinion of this limited access? I know you said you applauded him, but
I applaud the fact that he didn't say no. Okay? I applaud the fact that he didn't just say no, which he might have had the ability to just say no. So this is a start. And it may not be the end, and probably won't be the end of the discussion. For those of you who continue to push for more and broader access through the department, through his people, go for it. But I'm just happy that some people, in addition to us, if you want to go through the process, will have a chance to go through these boxes. And I'll tell you, it's a fascinating experience if you're just a historian or interested in history, to be able to touch, to feel, to see the way in which reports were written back then. These are all hand typewritten, and they smell like old library books.
You make it sound like it's like the 1800s or something. It wasn't
It's not the
1970.
1800s, but it's surprising how far we've come along. I mean, in these days, we have word processors, we don't have to hand type, we don't have to white out. Reel-to-reel tapes are what is used here. So it was a different world, and even though it was only 40 years ago.
How many hours did you spend on this?
I can't tell you, but it was a long process.
Can you give us a ballpark?
I'd have to talk to my colleague about that. Do you have any idea?
You guys are attorneys, you guys know
Yeah,
about
you know,
hours.
we do, although it's been a long process and have a lot of other things going on in the interim. So it's been a lot
Over
of here
what?
and there over the last couple, 3 months, probably 150 hours.
Okay. And so are you ruling out that he was targeted?
All I'm saying is because, who knows, there may be a ninth box, right? I mean, so you can never entirely eliminate possibilities here.
So you're suggesting that...
I'm not suggesting there is a ninth box. All I'm suggesting is that you can almost never disprove a negative. And that's essentially what you need to do here. But I'm saying is that the evidence that comes from these boxes, that emanates from this material behind me, does not support a targeting theory.
I think one of my colleagues was asking, was he out of policy given the policies at the time? Did you have access to the policies at the time?
You know, that's a question that really can't have an answer, because no one in law enforcement was ever held accountable for these kinds of tactical decisions. In fact, today, in many jurisdictions, in many law enforcement agencies, tactical decisions do not result in accountability and discipline. They do in the Sheriff's Department, but in 1970 they didn't.
So was there a policy at the time?
There are all kinds of policies.
Well, a policy regarding use of a tear gas projectile.
If you line up, this isn't a policy, Frank, but if you line up the manual and the resource materials, which are in the boxes, with the behavior and the weapon choice that the deputy used, it's apparent to us, looking at it now, that this was a poor weapons choice and was not consistent with how the publishers of the manual expected that this weapon would be deployed.
It was out of policy.
It was out of their it was inconsistent with their manual. The department didn't adopt the manual as their policy, but they used it as their Bible to decide on how to operate this equipment.
Do you think he was criminally negligent?
I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not the district attorney, and the district attorney back then decided he wasn't. That's all I really can say about that.
Did you make any attempt to contact other deputies who were outside the Silver Dollar Cafe that afternoon with Mr. Wilson?
No, sir.